They say some stones speak louder than any scripture ever written. And beneath the ancient, sun-baked streets of Jerusalem, there is one stone silent, heavy, cold, that may have cradled the most sacred body in all of human history. The tomb of Christ. It's a phrase whispered in reverence by the faithful, debated by historians, and pursued obsessively by archaeologists. But what if the truth is far less certain than we've been led to believe? What if the tomb we visit, the one surrounded by incense smoke and the prayers of millions, isn't what we think it is? Or worse, what if it was never a tomb at all? To understand the magnitude of this question, we must walk back nearly 2,000 years. Not in spirit, not in myth, but in stone. Into the very soil of Jerusalem. Back then, the city was a crucible of tension. Roman occupation, Jewish resistance, and whispers of a man named Jesus of Nazareth. A teacher, a healer, a rebel. His death on a Roman cross was brutal but not uncommon. Crucifixion was a warning, a display. Bodies were often left to rot in public, a feast for crows and the sun. But the Gospels tell a different story. A man named Joseph of Arimathea, a quiet figure scarcely mentioned before, steps forward. He asks Pilate for Jesus' body. He wraps it in linen. He places it in a rock-cut tomb, in which no one had yet been laid. A tomb of purity, of intention, of finality. And yet, the tomb vanishes from the historical record almost immediately. No one knows precisely where it was. For nearly 3 centuries, the location of Christ's burial remained unknown, or at least unverified. The early Christians were scattered, persecuted, hidden in catacombs, and more concerned with survival than monument building. The places of Christ's life became spiritual memories rather than sacred geographies. But all of that changed in the 4th century. A new Roman emperor, Constantine, converted to Christianity, or at least embraced its political potential. Under his rule, Christianity transformed from outlawed cult to state religion. And with that shift came a desire for structure, legitimacy, and relics. Enter Empress Helena, Constantine's mother. Helena was devout, determined, and according to legend, guided by dreams. She journeyed to Jerusalem in search of holy truth. Not metaphorical truth, literal places, the manger, the cross, the tomb. At that time, a Roman temple to Venus stood on a rocky hill just outside the city's reconstructed walls. Helena ordered the temple dismantled, stone by stone. Excavations began, and there, beneath layers of pagan stone, workers reportedly discovered a rock-hewn chamber. It fit the general gospel description. Near a place of execution, outside the old city gates in a garden area. Inside were fragments of a cross, burial niches, and most importantly, a flat, smooth slab said to be the very place Christ's body had been laid. Helena believed. Constantine ordered the construction of a great church atop it, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And so the site became sacred. Pilgrims came, thousands of them. They wept, they touched the stone, they left prayers in the cracks. Over the centuries, the church was destroyed, rebuilt, desecrated, and restored. Survived wars, fires, conquests. Crusaders reconsecrated it with blood. Muslim rulers allowed it to stand. Christian sects fought bitterly over its altars, locking and unlocking its gates daily in a dance of ancient rivalry. Today, the church remains one of the holiest sites in Christianity. Tourists and believers line up by the hundreds to enter the small chamber believed to be the tomb of Christ. They kneel, they kiss the stone. Some report miracles, others weep without knowing why. But not everyone is convinced. Some archaeologists raise a skeptical eyebrow. Why would Helena, arriving 3 centuries after the event, be able to locate a forgotten tomb with no surviving maps or records? Why would a Roman temple be built atop it in the first place? There's also a geographical issue. The Gospel accounts suggest the tomb was outside the city walls at the time of Christ's death. But the current location of the Holy Sepulchre is well within the modern Old City of Jerusalem. Defenders argue that the city's walls have changed over the centuries. And they're right. But others claim that the tomb's location was simply convenient, close to a Roman quarry, a site already associated with death and burial and easily accessible for construction. Then there are the architectural questions. The so-called tomb bears similarities to many first-century Jewish burial sites. A small entrance, a chamber carved from limestone, and niches for bodies. But there's nothing inherently unique about it. Other tombs from the same era have been found, undisturbed and untouched by sacred tradition. And then, there is silence, the eerie kind. Visitors often report an unsettling stillness within the tomb chamber, beyond the religious awe. A kind of tension, as though the stone is remembering something or hiding it. Could it be that the real tomb lies elsewhere? Perhaps beneath an unmarked hill or under a forgotten olive grove outside Jerusalem. Or perhaps there was never a tomb at all? Some fringe scholars propose that the tomb narrative was a literary device, added to affirm the resurrection account. Others suggest that Jesus was buried in a common grave, and that the tomb story was retroactively created to match prophecy. Still, for billions of believers, the question of geography is irrelevant. The tomb is not just a location. It is a symbol, a convergence of faith and stone. But symbols can be powerful enough to shape reality. So we return to the question, is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre built over the tomb of Christ? Or was it built over the tomb of certainty? Something we needed to believe in, even if the truth was buried deeper than stone? If the Church of the Holy Sepulchre isn't the tomb of Christ, then where is it? That simple question has haunted theologians, historians, and seekers for centuries. And as we descend deeper into the catacombs of this mystery, we find that Jerusalem may hold more than just one temple. In fact, the city and its outskirts are littered with ancient tombs, carved into hillsides, sealed with stone, most of them forgotten by time, but a few continue to provoke. One of the most famous alternatives is the Garden Tomb. In 1867, outside the Damascus Gate of Jerusalem's Old City, a rock-cut tomb was discovered. Peaceful, shaded by olive trees and blooming flowers, it looked like it had stepped straight out of a Sunday school illustration. British General Charles Gordon visited the site and became convinced it was the true burial place of Christ. The location fit certain gospel descriptions better than the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It was in a garden, near a skull-shaped hill Golgotha. The tomb even had a groove for a rolling stone. For Protestant Christians, weary of Catholic ritual and Byzantine grandeur, the Garden Tomb offered something simpler, more intimate, less polluted by politics. Felt right, but feelings do not satisfy archaeology. Most scholars date the Garden Tomb to the 7th century BCE, centuries too early for the time of Christ. Its architecture doesn't match the style of 1st century Jewish burials. There are no inscriptions, no relics, no traces of occupation from the Roman period. Beautiful as it is, the Garden Tomb may simply be that, a peaceful garden. Then there is Talpiot. In 1980, a construction crew digging foundations in the Talpiot neighborhood of Jerusalem stumbled upon a 2,000-year-old tomb. Inside were 10 ossuaries, limestone boxes used to hold bones after flesh had decayed. Several of them bore inscriptions, names like Yeshua bar Yosef, Jesus son of Joseph, Maria, Yos, Matcha, even Judah, son of Jesus. You can imagine the stir. Could this be the family tomb of Jesus of Nazareth? Documentaries, books, and media storms erupted. Filmmakers like James Cameron backed the theory. It felt revolutionary, scandalous, and deeply personal. But again, there were problems. The names found inside were incredibly common at the time. Yeshua, Maria, Joseph. These were like John or Mary today. The tomb had been opened, reclosed, and its contents possibly tampered with. The connection was circumstantial. There was no conclusive DNA evidence. And most telling of all, there was no evidence of veneration. If early Christians had believed this to be Christ's tomb, wouldn't it have become a pilgrimage site? Instead, it lay in silence. Still, Talpiot won't go away, because it challenges the very framework of belief. If Jesus had a family tomb, if his body was laid there and remained, what then becomes of resurrection? This is where archaeology collides violently with theology. and where silence speaks loudest. But there's more. Scattered across the hills of Judea and the fields of Galilee are other tombs, unmarked, uncelebrated. Some bear strange graffiti, fish symbols, cryptic crosses, and primitive Christian prayers. Some have been looted, others remain sealed. Many have yet to be excavated at all, because in Jerusalem, to dig is to awaken ghosts. Political, religious, historical. Every shovel of dirt risks stirring centuries of tension. Orthodox Jews oppose excavation of ancient graves, viewing them as sacred. Muslim authorities monitor activity beneath the Temple Mount with suspicion. Christian denominations argue over stones, candles, and who has the right to polish which part of a floor. Jerusalem is not just holy, it is territorial. And yet, the truth might lie somewhere beneath, somewhere between faith and fracture. A few rogue scholars believe the tomb was never in Jerusalem at all. They point to the Essenes, an apocalyptic Jewish sect who lived near Qumran and may have been linked to early Christianity. Could Jesus have been buried in their territory? In a cave near the Dead Sea? There are even stranger theories. Some suggest Jesus never died, that he fled to India, that his tomb lies in Kashmir, beneath an anonymous shrine. These ideas are fringe, unsupported, often offensive to orthodoxy. And yet, they persist, because mystery invites myth, and the absence of clarity creates a vacuum that stories are eager to fill. Meanwhile, back at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, scientific study continues. In 2016, the tomb's surface was opened for the first time in centuries. Beneath layers of marble and stone, researchers found more stone, and possibly the original burial shelf. Samples were taken. Analysis began. The results were surprising. The cave beneath does date to the Roman period. The tomb likely did exist around the 1st century. The Christian tradition may not be as disconnected from physical reality as skeptics claimed. But there was no inscription, no name, no undeniable signature of divinity. Only stone, cold, still, and unresolved. Some say that's fitting, that Christ's tomb should remain cloaked in ambiguity, a place of both presence and absence, a riddle in stone. Others aren't so sure. They demand answers, coordinates, carbon dating, GPS pins for belief. But perhaps the point was never to find the tomb. Perhaps the tomb was never meant to be found. After all, Christianity is founded not on a grave, but on an empty one. And maybe, just maybe, that emptiness is its greatest truth. Perhaps we've been asking the wrong question all along. Perhaps it was never about where the tomb was, under which slab, behind which church, beneath which empire's vision. Perhaps the real mystery lies not in location, but in meaning. The tomb of Christ, whether it lies beneath a cathedral in Jerusalem, a garden wall, or nowhere at all, is not just a historical question. It is a vessel of longing, a doorway between doubt and belief, between what we can measure and what we feel. Because for nearly 2,000 years, people have not simply searched for the tomb. They've searched for certainty. They came with incense and bare feet, heads bowed, lips trembling. They wept not just for Christ, but for themselves, for their suffering, their unanswered prayers, their loneliness. And when they knelt before a cold slab of stone and imagined that it once held the body of God, something happened. Whether or not the tomb was real, the experience was, changed them. And maybe that's the point. Because what is faith if not an agreement to live with mystery? What is belief if not the bravery to kneel before something you cannot explain? Let us imagine for a moment that the tomb is under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Let us say that the archaeologists are right, that Empress Helena's vision led her to the very place where the crucified Jesus was laid to rest. That would mean that beneath centuries of candles, behind layers of marble and history and empire, lies the one place on earth that held the silence between death and resurrection. That silence is sacred. But let us now imagine that the tomb is elsewhere or nowhere, that the burial place of Jesus of Nazareth has been lost forever to time, or was never monumental to begin with, that his body was laid in a common grave, or never buried at all. Would the story lose its power? Would Easter morning lose its meaning? Perhaps not. Because the strength of Christianity has never depended solely on what was found, but on what was not. Not the cross, not the crown, not the spear, not even the tomb, but the absence, the empty space, the moment when the women arrived and found the stone rolled away. The empty tomb, in all its ambiguity, became the most powerful symbol in history. Tells us that death is not the end, that darkness does not hold the final word, that even in silence, something sacred stirs. And maybe, just maybe, the mystery itself is the miracle, because we, as humans, are drawn to sacred absence, to the unexplained, the holy that evades measurement. No one asks to visit the exact patch of dirt where Moses once stood. No one argues over the GPS coordinates of Abraham's dreams. These stories were never about places. They were about promises. So why should the tomb be any different? In fact, the very uncertainty of the tomb may be its greatest strength. If we had the stone, the DNA, the perfect archaeological match, faith might become a museum piece, cataloged, preserved, and ultimately powerless. But because it remains elusive, we keep searching. And in that search, faith is renewed. That is why people still walk to Jerusalem, still crawl beneath the domes and lamps of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, still press their hands to the stone, just to feel something, anything, that whispers, "He was here." That is why the garden tomb still draws quiet prayers, even if it is archaeologically improbable. Why pilgrims still visit Talpiot, even if its theory is shaky. Because these are not just sights, they are mirrors, each one reflecting a different part of the human heart. The desire for wonder, for proof, for story, for presence. Even those who reject the tomb entirely, who believe the resurrection to be metaphor, are still haunted by the question, why does it matter so much? Because it speaks to something beyond religion, beyond theology. It speaks to the human desire for meaning, and that's the power of the tomb. It holds space not just for Christ, but for us, our doubts, our losses, our hope that something survives death, that something waits beyond the veil. And in this way, every tomb becomes the tomb. Every place of mystery becomes a holy ground, a dark cave in Jerusalem, a sealed ossuary in Talpiot, a garden in spring bloom, a blank page in history. All of them echo the same question. Not just where is the tomb of Christ, but what do we believe rose from it? And if that answer lives in us, then maybe the tomb doesn't need to be found. Maybe it was never about finding the place. Maybe it was always about finding the courage to believe that a story doesn't need walls to live on, that a silence can speak louder than stone, that a man could die in agony and rise again, not in body, but in the hearts of those who risked loving the world he left behind. And so we leave the stone where it lies, unmarked, uncertain, and holy.